Thank you very much indeed, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today and to bring you, our Japanese cooperators, the great support and solidarity of the board of the International Cooperative Alliance and indeed your fellow billion cooperators around the world. So thank you for this opportunity to be with you. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow cooperators and dear friends, we meet here today at an important moment in the evolution of cooperative enterprise in the Japanese economy. After the end of the last war, cooperatives played a key and strategic role in the emergence in Japan of an energetic, innovative economy, which in turn led to an enviable quality of life in the decades leading up to and almost to the turn of the century. As the cooperative movement here grew and flourished at grassroots and community level over 50 years, they also looked to fulfill their wider cooperative mission, which we all know is to meet the needs of their members. In agricultural terms, this meant looking to create financial structures, a bank and insurance business in support of growth and managing improved farmer prosperity. But then, more personal and social care, health, funerals, and so on. This is evidence of a successful cooperative economy, not just supporting member economic well-being, but looking to see what else could be provided that would support social cohesion, community well-being, personal growth and aspiration. In this way, Japanese cooperatives were an exemplar of what a cooperative should be: an open and voluntary organisation, member-owned and controlled, autonomous and independent, giving an economic return to members, growing the skills of local people and developing local leadership, cooperating with other cooperatives, and caring for the community. No wonder, then, that the world came to see Japan as a strong, committed, and important member of the global cooperative family. Not just that, but the support that the Japanese Ministry of Forestry and Fisheries has given to the International Cooperative Alliance over decades for the development of cooperatives in other parts of the Asian region appeared to show that all political parties in Japan believed that this cooperative movement was impressive, well worth supporting domestically, and that it was in the interest of the Japanese people and the government's international policy to pursue the evolution of stronger, more professional cooperatives around Asia aligned to the Japanese model. So about 20 years ago, as you all know, the Japanese economy started to stagnate, and successive governments failed to find a way to really successfully stimulate and reactivate growth and innovation. Japan's economy was still pretty unhappy when in 2008 the world was hit by the great financial crisis and the collapse of the global financial institutions, and the whole of the developed world was plunged into a severe recession from which much of it still has to fully recover. At the same time, the economic and political realities across the world began to change with increasing speed. Economic and political power began an apparently inevitable shift from north to south and from west to east. New ramifications from the communications and information revolution were manifest, with the growth of grassroots alienation from the existing political and economic structures. WikiLeaks, the Arab Spring, Los Indignados in Spain, the Occupy Wall Street movement that started in Wall Street, of course, and spread around the world. The jihadist movement that is now striking around the world, the Lint Cafe in Sydney, Australia, the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa, Charlie Hebdo in Paris just recently, as well as 9/11 in Washington, a train in Madrid, the metro and bus bombs in London, let alone what's happening in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Sudan, and not forgetting, of course, the conflict in Ukraine and much more. My friends, our world is changing very fast. As if that wasn't enough, Japan was hit by the most fearsome and destructive natural disaster. The Great Eastern Japan earthquake, the tsunami, and then the impact on man-made structures, the nuclear plant disaster. At that cruel moment for so many, cooperatives were at the forefront in support and recovery for victims, their families, and their futures. I was here twice during that period, and I saw and heard from victims, from local prefecture leaders, and from the national media that cooperatives were to be much praised for their dedication, commitment, and generosity of financial and human resources at that time. Japan's cooperatives were certainly not found wanting during that national crisis. In the midst of this most turbulent point in the history of our planet, the United Nations declared 2012 the International Year of Cooperatives. It was a recognition, in the words of the Secretary-General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, that cooperatives are a reminder to the international community that it is possible to pursue both economic viability and social responsibility. This, coupled with the statement from the UN Social Development Report that cooperatives support the living standards of half the world's population, gave a strong endorsement to the impact that the model of cooperative enterprise was already having on the global economy, and the UN's expectation that there was much, much more that we could do together. And let's be clear, my friends, the cooperative movement is having a significant impact. The International Cooperative Alliance has cooperative members in nearly 100 countries around the world. Those cooperatives are owned by over 1 billion of the world's citizens, 3 times as many as hold individual shares in the world's stock markets. We know from a recent report by SICOPA, the Global World Worker Cooperative Federation, and launched in Quebec City just last October, that 250 million people have their livelihood secured within a cooperative, either as a direct employee or as a member of a worker cooperative, or by a producer cooperative of one sort or another, most importantly, farming and fisheries. That's 250 million people actively relying on a cooperative for their living. We also know that the 300 largest cooperatives now have a combined turnover of $2.2 trillion US. That, ladies and gentlemen, means that our largest 300 cooperatives alone have a combined turnover equivalent to the GDP of the 7th largest country in the world. And for me, of particular interest, is that it gives us a larger turnover than the GDP of my own country, the United Kingdom. Perhaps even more interesting is that in the last 3 years, that turnover has grown by 12%, higher than the global GDP growth. So we are gaining market share across the world. And if we look at just one of our business sectors, the largest one, insurance, we see that it represents 27% of the total global insurance industry, 27%, with $1.25 trillion US in premiums. And that is a growth of 28% in the last 6 years, during the worst period of the financial collapse. And that's against a market growth globally of 12%, so 28% growth in cooperatives. Global assets under management in our insurance sector are $8 trillion US, or 29% of the total insurance industry. And critically, for world leaders who are struggling to create growth and employment in the global economy, our insurance sector has created another 120,000 jobs over the last 4 years. is there really any need to make the case for the value that our cooperative model of business brings to the global economy? Together, we are having a seriously great impact. At the end of last year, and after 3 years of campaigning for it by the Alliance, this was recognised by the G20 and its business advisory group, the B20, which has now accepted our business model as a key component in their annual work to adopt recommendations for presentation to the leaders of the 20 largest nations in the world, which together represent 84% of the world's GDP. This year, 16 significant cooperative businesses from around the world have secured places on the task force that the B20 is organising that will deal with financing global growth, trade, infrastructure and investment, employment, and SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, and entrepreneurship. With the Alliance coordinating this work, we're looking forward to seeing co-op values reflected in the decisions taken at the end of this year on the direction of the global economy. Following 2012 and the International Year of Cooperatives, 2013 was declared the International Year of Family Farming, most of whom use cooperatives to get their products to market, to add value to their products, and for distribution. This year, 2014, is the International Year of the Soil. 3 years in a row in which agricultural cooperatives, with their unique legal and financial structure, their participatory democracy, and their cooperative governance, have had a huge contribution to make. Meanwhile, the International Cooperative Alliance has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, which commits us to try and develop a cooperative agricultural economy in sub-Saharan Africa, to feed Africa and later the rest of the world. All this and more is evidence of the growing emphasis and confidence in cooperative farming. So, it was with some incredulity that I first heard that the Japanese government was looking to and thinking about dismantling key parts of its agricultural cooperative community. And I asked myself, why? Why at this time, when the cooperative model of business has so much going for it, when key global bodies are recognising our unique contribution, when the world is looking for a more fair and equitable economic system, why now is Japan, in the past so supportive of cooperatives, why is it thinking to demutualise parts of the Japanese movement? Firstly, let me say quite clearly that it is not the role or the intention of the International Cooperative Alliance, and certainly not of its president, to interfere in the right of a national government to govern. But I do think that it's crucial that the International Cooperative Alliance should look carefully at any significant national legislation anywhere in the world that might have either intended or unintended consequences for cooperative enterprise, or that appears to move in the direction that seems to counter the democratic rights of the members. Ladies and gentlemen, the newly released legislative programme of the Japanese government is hot off the presses, so I can't claim to be an expert. But on a first reading, I think this reform offers and presents both challenges and opportunities. It's built on the stated desire of the government to strengthen and grow the agricultural sector of the Japanese economy. This must present an opportunity to agricultural cooperatives, and I note the comments made by Mr. Banzai in deciding that this was the moment for JA Zenshu to step up to that challenge, and I welcome that. The reform plan also seeks to put the agricultural financial sector into independent cooperatives owned and controlled by agricultural grassroots cooperatives. That, again, is to be welcomed. Let's be frank, we're talking about some of the most successful agricultural cooperative structures in the world. For example, Zencurian in the place of honour, coming out in the Alliance's largest 300 cooperatives as the largest cooperative in the world, first place. With Zennon in 6th place and the Norinchukin Bank at 46. In fact, Japan has 14 in the Alliance's list of the largest 300 cooperatives and mutuals in the world. It's a strong, powerful record of success. I would, however, also urge caution on the proposal to remove the audit function from JA Zenshu, the National Agricultural Cooperative Federation. This sort of proposal, in my experience around the world, always seems to stem from an ill-informed view of the true nature of a cooperative and the belief that it can be treated exactly the same as a corporation or a company. A cooperative has a unique legal and financial structure. It's very normal around the world to find in-house auditing functions within the key national apex for cooperatives. They understand cooperative structures. They know the strengths and the weaknesses of the structure. And they do not perform just a numbers-based audit, as commercial audit firms will do. They also have a critical role in establishing the good health of the cooperative nature of the business, auditing the governance of a co-op, the electoral system, adherence to its cooperative purpose, and so much more. And this is one of the vital checks and balances needed in a cooperative that cannot be found in a commercial audit firm. These checks and balances are what gives confidence to members that their co-op is stable, well-run, and properly and democratically governed and accountable, as well as in good financial health. You tamper with this at your peril. Yesterday, I had the chance to visit and speak to JA officials and local farmers at JA Tomisato and then at JA Atsugi in the Kanagawa prefecture. Excuse my Japanese. Their enthusiasm for their cooperatives and the pride in the quality products being produced and sold was energising, really exciting. Local people, serving local people, and keeping the wealth generated by their labour in the local community, benefiting them, their families, their friends, and their neighbours. They told me of their concerns about the lack of clarity in what the government is trying to achieve. Yes, of course, they liked the aspiration to double their incomes, but couldn't see how this would come about by, for instance, removing the audit function, which incidentally they value, from JA Zenshu, or, for instance, by converting the hospitals and health services from JA Zenshu to stock-listed companies when the local hospitals currently meets their needs, is trusted and respected by local people. Colleagues, these examples demonstrate how important it is that the co-op movement and the government sit down and talk about how best to meet the government's concerns in the coming months. I can tell you that around the world, there are, for instance, high-quality, good-performing health cooperatives that could be exemplars for change. For instance, Unimed, the largest health cooperative in the world in Brazil, serving 18 million Brazilian families, and which won the tender against strong competition from the private sector to provide the medical services at the last Football World Cup. Cooperatives don't need to invent the wheel. There's always another cooperative somewhere in the world that will be only too delighted to share its operational model with you. That's another way in which cooperatives differ from stock-listed companies, by the way. We want to share and expand this people-centred, member-owned and controlled business model. And the International Cooperative Alliance is here to facilitate that knowledge transfer around the world. Let me end by quoting to you a strong cooperative visionary, His Holiness Pope Francis, who has invited me to the Vatican twice in the last 2 years to discuss his demand of global leaders that it really is time that we put the human being back into the global economy. That is what cooperatives do. We put people at the heart of our economic decision-making. That is why those national economies that had a better balanced and more diversified economy have come through the financial crisis of recent years and the economic recession more comfortably than those dependent on one form of business. The International Cooperative Alliance will continue to work closely with JA's-NCU in coming months to ensure that all the expertise, the skills and support that it might need is available to them and our cooperative farmers and colleagues here in Japan. We stand ready to help, we will continue to support, and we wish you good luck in the coming months as JA's-NCU negotiates with the government on the completion of the reform plan. Thank you very much.